Real Life Podcast, huh? I ain't heard that name in a long, long time. Yeah, sorry about that. Life got mad hectic, but we are so back after a break. Welcome back to the Real Life Podcast, and this is episode number 39, the Halloween special for 2025. Today, I'm sat down with my sister once again to discuss all things scary movies. Now, I love horror and scary movies, and I think they're some of the best films ever made in amongst that genre, but my sister is not so keen. We're basically going to have a chat about our experiences with horror films, why I love them, why Verity's less keen, why there's lots of interesting stuff in this chat. Hopefully everyone will find something to resonate with. I also film this in the pub that I work in, so if you hear any pub noises, that will be why. But blissfully, it's the first podcast where I've had a pint mid-record, and that is how I should do every single one of these, to be honest. It's a slightly less structured chat than other episodes, but still lots of interesting stuff. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy an hour of horror film chat with someone who just hates them. I will be looking to rekindle this sacred pod because I've missed doing this a lot. So thank you everyone for sticking around, and I'll see you again for more episodes soon. But for now, enjoy. So you're not really a horror fan?
You're not going to like address that I'm here? Do I not have to be like, hi, I'm here?
Okay, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay. Yeah, no, I hate horror.
Right. Yeah, it's my sister, everyone.
Hi.
So why don't you like horror films, you think?
Why don't I like horror? Excellent question. I don't like being scared unnecessarily. Especially when it's something supernatural, because I feel like if I'm on a roller coaster, like if I die, I made that decision. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But if I'm watching a scary movie and I die, I didn't choose that. So yeah, that's how I feel.
I understand. I should also preface by this that I am sitting here in the pub that I work in. I've probably already mentioned this in the intro, but I'm sitting here in the pub that I work in with a pint.
You've got beer.
I do have beer, yeah.
You should have told me. I've got so much alcohol.
Sorry, apologies. But anyway, if you hear the general sounds of pubbiness or the bell from the kitchen going at any stage like that, just ignore it.
I did hear pubbiness, but I didn't hear bell.
Okay, well, that's good. So basically, I asked that question because a lot of people, steer away from horror. They say that they don't really enjoy it and they tend to, avoid it, and it's not their thing. And I always wonder why, because I think in my head, it's sort of the purest form of film and cinema that you're ever going to get.
Why?
And the reason for that is that I think there's a strong idea to say that horror evokes the most strong emotions out of any viewing experience that you could possibly have, right? I think in terms of creating physical atmosphere and physical feeling, nothing stimulates audiences like a horror film does. The danger of that, obviously, is that it then gets twisted and that's used against it because it's sort of made cheap and it's made exclusively to elicit reactions in a sort of a base level, broad, fearful sense.
For sure, but I feel like I've had some stronger responses to films than horror films.
No, you have, but by the same token, you also steer yourself away from horror films because you don't like the idea of being scared, right? So your experiences with horror films actually, they're not. I'm not saying you've never seen a horror film, but like, you would favor the films that have given you strong reactions in another way.
Yeah.
But what I also think is that what that means is that horror films can elicit those same responses, but also make you feel a lot more kind of present and actually grounded in the story that you're in anyway.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I like a certain kind of horror film.
Yeah, what kind of horror films are that?
Not the shit ones. I like.
And are the shit ones? Are we talking like Annabelle and The Conjuring? Because they're the shit ones for me.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Anti that big no.
Yeah.
No, I like things like The Quiet Place. I like Get Out. I like End of List.
Okay, good. Right. Let's dive in on those two films.
Yeah.
No, so I understand that, but what's interesting about that to me is that there's actually two very different strands of horror films there. They're both ingenuitive, right, in the way that they play with the genre. But A Quiet Place, whilst at the heart of it, yes, is a story about family, and that's absolutely the crux of it. It's like Fast and Furious family.
What?
That's what all they talk about in Fast and Furious. They just send a car into space and then go, do you know what
It's
this is
just
about?
a bunch of bald men that look like each other and drive fast cars.
There's never been a better description of Fast and Furious ever. But they send Jack Howard has this great quote about the eighth one, or the ninth one, whichever one it is. But he said they sent a car to space and made it boring. That sums up
Yeah,
Fast and
fair.
Furious.
So
Um,
valid.
and then at the end they go, "This was about." Quiet Place actually is about family, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's very much heart of it. But it isn't a psychological horror film. It's a very much a physical
No, for
horror.
sure. But the challenge of both of them, in a way, is like, oh, could you do it?
Yeah,
Like
I certainly sense that.
the
Yeah.
challenge of like A Quiet Place is like, oh, could you be quiet? And then
Hmm.
the challenge of Get Out is like, oh, do you think you'd like suss it? Do you think you'd be able to like leave?
Sure.
And I know that that's kind of the thing with like loads of horror movies. It's like, oh, would you die first? Blah 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 blah. But like, if you take something that is technically a horror film but isn't, something like Zombieland or something like Shaun of the Dead, which also I
Hmm.
will watch.
Yeah.
I quite like that the horror offsets the comedy offsets the horror, but like
Hmm.
there's also that kind of element of like, who would you be? Ha 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 ha,
Hmm.
because they like play on these tropes. But it's like that game that you play if like somebody goes on TV and they have to like hold their breath while they like walk across somewhere or while they like go
Yeah.
underwater, and you're like, oh my God, you try and hold your breath with them. And that's what I quite like about those two. I'm like, that's really feasible, not feasible, but like that it's tangible for me. Whereas like the doll that comes to life, I'm like, tap out immediately. No, I couldn't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Like,
No, I get that, but what I'm getting at is that there are two different styles of horror. A
sure.
Quiet Place is a much more conventional horror film with a premise, and that's what they explore. And they use other themes to do it, but there's also
Are we doing this because
more
it's
conventional horror
Halloween?
film. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
Halloween
cool. Good,
special.
good. Yeah, yeah.
But Get Out is out and out psychological horror. It relies so much less on jump scares and more about the feeling of entrapment and the feeling of unease to uh, to get its mood across to make its point, right? Which is really interesting. And obviously, there's loads of other themes in there about race relations
Mm.
and the perception of white people of themselves and all that sort of stuff, and their superiority and their complexes and all that sort of stuff. But
I
what I'm
just
getting
think
at
horror
here,
is cleverer if you can do it not in the dark.
so that's an interesting thesis, and it brings me on to something that I want to vaguely mention, even if you haven't seen it. So sorry for this.
Sure.
Have you seen The Shining?
Is that the one with the twins?
Yes, and it's the one where Jack Nicholson goes mad in the hotel.
Like, I think so, some of it.
Okay. So when when Stanley Kubrick came around to making it,
Mm,
he was absolutely at his height, at his pomp, right? And he
mhm.
was every film he was doing, it was being billed as Stanley Tucci makes the great insert genre here. So
Fun.
2001 was Stanley Kubrick makes the great sci-fi film.
Also, by the way, you
Uh,
just said Stanley Tucci, not Stanley Kubrick.
did I really?
Yeah.
Look,
Who also makes incredible films. Easy A,
I can't help but
Devil
let
Wears
my love
Prada.
shine through. I love the bald man.
I love that man.
And then it came to The Shining, and everyone said, right, he's going to make the definitive horror
Mm,
film. And the thing about The Shining is it's lots of things to talk about. It's very intricate. It's very cleverly made physically. It's very sort of, it's slightly haunting, but it
mhm.
isn't scary. I genuinely don't think there are any really scary moments in The Shining in
Is that the
terms of
one
out
with
and
the
out jump
shower?
scares. The shower, the shower's in it.
The
Yeah, that's Psycho.
Oh, then no, I haven't seen it.
That was it's a cardinal filmic sin, is what you just done there. Psycho is brilliant, but no, it's not that. So the thing about The Shining is everyone always cites it, as the greatest ever horror film or in the top 10 or whatever, but it
Why
actually
isn't
isn't
it
very.
though?
So because it isn't scary. The only scary way I have found to look at it is the story. If you look at it through the lens of the little boy in it, it is a story of his parents' divorce and them learning to hate each other and him being caught up in the middle of it. That is the only feasible metaphor or viewpoint for that film that I've found it to be genuinely scary. Because the rest of the time, it's like I say, well made and uneasy and kind of interesting, and there's lots to talk about, but it isn't scary. So often I think horror as a vessel leads to the greatest way to talk about things rather than just a straightforward film. So I think, and that frustrates me because then you get Annabelle and The Conjuring and all and The Nun and stuff where it is just literally about how can we scare you the most, but because you're doing that, you're going to be scared, so you're not scared.
Okay, but what are we defining as like not scary? Because there are some things that like aren't like horror, but that
Mhm.
I find scary or daunting or
Well,
whatever.
so yeah, we're going to get onto that. But
Okay.
in terms of that, there is one or two jump scares in it. There's a jump scare involving an axe, right?
But does
And
something
it
have to be jump scare? Sorry, does something have to
no,
have a jump scare to be horror?
no, absolutely not,
Okay.
absolutely not. But it, it fundamentally isn't scary. It's interesting and it's unusual and it's slightly unsettling, but it isn't ever scary. You're not ever scared by it, right? Or at
Okay.
least I wasn't anyway.
Oh,
And there
good
are
God,
films that
no.
well, no, it's just that, there's plenty of films I have been terrified at.
Mm,
But that wasn't one of them. And what I
okay.
think it proved actually, and what I think Kubrick's best part of it was that it used horror as the genre to set up with, but then from there, it discussed all the kind of human ideas that any other film would talk about, except it used a more slightly, it used the genre which gets the audience immediately on edge more. So everyone's senses are heightened. That's kind of the point of it. And I dislike how much horror is disregarded by academies and guilds and awards. Because everyone thinks it's all a cheap shot. They think it's all Annabelle and it's all the nun. It's all about trying to scare you. And actually, it's the best vessel, in my view, for using cinema to actually explore human conditions. And on to that point, my question for you
Okay.
is, what are the scariest things you've ever seen? And let's dissect them from there.
Um,
Is there, when I say the scariest film you've ever seen, is there something that immediately springs to your mind?
yes.
What would it be?
I went to go and see Us
Mhm.
at the cinema.
It's one of my absolute all-time favorites.
I I regretted this decision almost immediately. I
Mhm.
skived off work to do it.
Right.
I was at university and I was working part-time and it was in the Easter holidays and I'd like literally stayed at university over Easter so that I
Mm.
could work and like do my shifts. And I skived off one of them by pretending that at Easter Sunday I'd had real gravy and not veggie gravy, and that had made me really ill.
That's good. That's
Can I
good.
just say, peak acting from me.
That is
My
unbelievable. Yeah.
career actually hasn't reached those heights again. And I've been a professional actress for 5 years. um, I skived off work and then I went to go and see it with a friend of mine, and she loved it. She was
Mhm.
like she was really wanting to see it and she enjoyed it, but like obviously we were terrified by it. It was one of the single most disgusting experiences of my life.
Mhm.
Just because when you see something and then you leave that environment and all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're like you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like because I was staying at uni over Easter, I was the only person in my house. We drove back from the cinema and both of us were like sat like in silence, like staring dead ahead of us. And then she was like, well, I'm not going back to my house alone. I was like, well, I'm not going back to my house alone. So like she was like, do you want to watch Drag Race and like forget that we ever watched that? I was like, yes, yes, absolutely
Mhm.
I do.
Mhm.
But I felt like I saw it everywhere. But the reason that the film was really scary for me
Mhm.
is because first, the concept was terrifying.
Yeah.
Secondly, the circumstance that I was seeing it in was a bit scary, and it was like after dark and like blah blah
Yeah.
blah,
Sure.
and then the third thing was that I was so convinced by the acting of it, like it wasn't
Mm.
tropey, it wasn't. I genuinely didn't know what was coming up next, and it was. I didn't like that whole ending where. I mean, spoilers, but
Yeah. So it's definite spoilers.
yeah. I didn't like the ending where you don't know who's who.
Okay. See, I think that's why that's interesting that you didn't like that. I
No,
think
no,
that's
as in
one of
like I
the
loved it as a film trope, but that's why it
yeah.
scared me.
Oh, I see. Right.
If
Okay.
that makes sense. Like I didn't like that didn't sit well with me because it made me scared because I was like, oh my
No,
God, but what's
sure.
good and what's bad and who's
So
yeah.
touching on that then,
Okay.
do you not think then that that's I mentioned scariest thing of this and that shot into your mind, right? That's one of the
Mm.
strongest reactions you've had to a filmic piece
Oh,
of media.
show.
And what you're describing to me is the fact that it was scary because it made you question things and think, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think the best films that anyone likes, you talk to people and you go, what's your favorite film? Well, I like a film that makes me think about something, you know?
No.
And that's what, okay, well, not all the time. Some people just
No,
want to
I'm joking.
watch
I'm
Tom
joking.
Cruise
I'm
and
just doing
boobs
it to
happen.
piss you off. I like Harry Potter 1 because they're all bad actors.
But like, that questioning and that response that it
Mm,
evokes is
yeah.
absolutely the best thing about it. And
Mm,
what I loved, I've talked about it on this podcast before, but what I loved about Us is it give me the chance to go away and just think about everything that it was saying, because
mm,
I'd had such a strong reaction to it in the cinema. I didn't necessarily compute it while it was going on, but then it gave me the chance to think about it. And what I
mm.
realize now is that actually it's not about doppelgangers coming to the surface and murdering their counterparts.
God, that was very Geordie.
Sorry.
That's right.
I'm being a
It's
bum.
not about
Um,
doppelgangers coming to the surface and murdering.
what it's actually about, me nothing know what it's about. All it's actually about is the failure of the American dream, right? The way I read it now is it's about us, US, right? And
Oh God.
I think there's so many allegories for that, which are presented to you in such a strongly emotionally responsive way that you can't help but focus on them more because it's a horror film. So, like, most of the main family kill their tethered counterparts using material goods, right?
Okay.
So, at the start of the film, they go to their holiday home in Santa Cruz, right? Or,
Mm,
near Santa Cruz Beach, right? And they've sort of got everything that you would kind of want as an American family, as the American
mm.
dream, but it doesn't quite work properly. The biggest example is the boat that Gabe has that pulls to the left. You've got to be careful. You've got to adjust the steering to it because it pulls a bit to the left. But we've got a boat, and every American family dreams of having a boat, and that being their escapism and all that sort of stuff.
What, like it pulls to the political left? Is that what you're about to say?
No, 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 that's too far. But um, he's got this everything's surface level, right?
Mm.
Everything, if you look at them, what they've got on the
The boat's
surface, it
not. That's some
looks
of
it
that's
look
below the surface.
very good, very
Thank
funny.
you.
If you look at what they've got on the surface, it all looks good, but it's superficial because underneath it there are holes in it and problems with it. Ergo, the US on the surface in that film looks great and has all this, but underneath it are these empty tunnels with all these problems in, right? Where everything is superficial underneath. And
Mm,
you know, so the daughter kills her tethered with a Range Rover or a big 4x4.
mm,
Gabe uses the boat to kill his tethered. And you've got all the stuff with golf clubs being a thing.
mm,
And often it's the material things that come to be the death of people in this
right.
in this world. And then you've also got stuff like the twins of the White family, that they're friends with at the beach.
Mm,
One of them is wearing a Black Flag t-shirt, and the Black Flag is this incredibly alternative, screw the system punk rock band, and that
mm.
is being worn by someone who is a clone of another human being, right? Is the least individual person in the whole film because she's literally a twin. She's a copy of another person, and she's
And
wearing a
she's a
Black
clone.
Flag t-shirt, and she's a clone
Okay.
as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's all that going on. And then at the end of it, you're left to go, okay, so there's the good people on the surface, and then there's the bad thing that's happening underneath. But then you realize that Red has been switched, and Red and Adelaide are the same person, and you don't
Mm.
know which one's which. So the whole problem, it's not the fact that they've switched and that's the twist. It's the fact that they've switched and we couldn't tell the difference. Everything that happened underneath could have been exactly the same as what was going on the surface had it not been for circumstance.
But I hear all that, and that is
Hmm.
all excellent and good. And um, yes, kind Sarah, I hear your point, but it doesn't change my mind. Like, yes, there's a lot in it, and it's really interesting, and there's a lot to it, and there's substance, and there's
Hmm.
like message that runs throughout. But my point is that I wouldn't want to watch it again because of the reaction that evoked from me. I'm not
Sure.
saying that the reason that I don't want to watch it is not because it doesn't evoke a reaction in me that I want. It's that reaction is strong, and that's not something that I want to feel again.
Yeah,
Like
sure.
if, for example, like if somebody punched you in the face, right? You'd be like, wow, I really felt that.
Hmm.
But you wouldn't be like, punch me again. Like not unless you're like a
No.
sadist. Do you know what I
So
mean?
yeah, I get that. I totally understand that. And but there's times when I watch a film and it does feel like being punched in the face, and I go, I'm never coming back to that again. But
What, like the
what
Meg?
I'm, yeah, or like more Morbius or something, and
Or
it's
Fast and Furious
Fast and Furious 9.
2 through 9, yeah.
Yes. But the difference is that it's not just about evoking a negative emotion when you're trying to when a horror film's trying to scare you. It's not just about making you as uncomfortable as possible. What it's about is using the very base level of human response and human reaction
Mm,
and flipping it on its head and using that vulnerable state to plant thoughts of confusion or questioning into your head. So,
I would argue that variation is the key to excellent filmmaking.
of course,
Now,
it is.
I don't deny that some of these horror movies are like objectively good films. Like I think
Hmm.
I watched Get Out and I watched Us and I watched all those things, and I think that objectively it's very brilliant filmmaking. It's very impressive to watch. It's incredible acting. Like the construction of it is amazing. But
Mm.
it's the same reason that I don't watch like Hallmark movies, is because the one I feel like it's trying to evoke one emotional response in me above others. It's trying to evoke one like feeling, and that feeling is like a fear or a tension or an anxiety. Whereas like the Hallmark one is like trying to evoke like I don't know, lust. Like do you know, that's the one thing.
Sure,
And so
I
it's the
understand.
same reason just on two different ends.
Sure. I think that's reductive in the
Okay.
extreme. And I think that's the thinking that people like the Academy will launch in. They
Okay.
go, right, well, yeah, it's good, but it's a horror film, so it's designed to scare you. It's not really a piece of cinema or whatever. It's like the same thing, but like a superhero, it's just designed to entertain you. It's not meant to be it doesn't matter. There's nothing else going on there.
Okay.
And actually, there is so much else going on there. I would argue there's a strong case that The Exorcist is the best film ever made. And it's terrifying and it's really unsettling. But what that then allows is that number one, I think you empathize with the characters who are going through something horrible a lot more
Hmm.
because you are equally in that sort of you're subjected into that state just as much as they might be, right? Because you're unsure of what's coming next and what's going to look like and if you're actually safe in any environment, all that sort of stuff. But what it then does is it makes the emotional responses of the characters, even outside of the scary moments, a lot more understandable and feel a lot more you can analyze them a lot easier because what you're doing in the moment where I know you haven't seen The Exorcist, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming you're aware of the spider walk backwards down the stairs. You know, when the girl's going back because you're doing the crab on the stairs going
Oh
backwards down it.
yeah, and his face is turned.
So yeah, so that happens, and then the mother sort of screams, and there's all this going on, right?
Yeah.
But what that moment is entirely about is about the response of the mother, and actually, what the film is all about is a priest who's lost his faith, not about a demon, right? Um,
Mm.
so you get all of this stuff. There's a really important cut in The Exorcist, which is when Reagan's the good little girl who's been possessed. Her
Mm.
head appears to turn 360 degrees.
I've also seen that clip.
Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
So it doesn't turn 360 degrees, right? And there was this whole debate about Will Friedkin, the guy that directed it, he said it can't turn 360. It doesn't make any sense. If a head turned 360 degrees, it would fall off. It doesn't make any sense. You can't do that, right? But so what happens in that moment is that her head turns nearly 180. It cuts back to Father Karras, the priest who's looking on, and then it cuts back to her as her head's rotating around the other way. And what that tells you is everything you're seeing is in Karras's mind. It's all about his perception of these things. And what that enables in such an extreme environment like a horror film like The Exorcist is to give scale to just how far this person's fallen into this kind of thinking trap, just how far they've fallen into their loss of faith, because they're now seeing things which literally shouldn't make any sense whatsoever. And that cut back to Karis tells you everything you need to know because and her head couldn't turn 360 degrees without her neck twisting and literally her head falling off. Doesn't make any sense. So I think what it does is when it's done right, and obviously there's a lot of horror that's not done right, and I think you're right in that sense that a lot of it falls into that category of it's just trying to scare me,
Mm.
and the themes are really thin, and there's nothing else going on. But when it's done right, what it actually enables is a heightened sense of alertness, a heightened sense of attempted understanding. So you can actually get some of the most impactful experiences emotionally outside of the sphere from horror films because they sort of lull you into that heightened state and you're then hyper aware of a lot more things.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from because you're right. Stuff like I think The Nun is some of the worst films
I
ever
mean, I haven't
made.
seen them and I won't. But
They're
like,
just
I mean, to
boring.
be fair, I hear what you're saying, and I have probably seen some of the wrong kinds of horror movies.
Hmm.
When I was at uni, there was a group of us in my like third year, and we used to just hang out in one of my friends' houses, and we used to watch like unacceptable movies, either like banned horror or yeah, it's a podcast now.
I was wondering if that was going to get picked up.
We used to watch like yeah, either horror movies or just like unacceptable movies that are
Hmm.
like that are like supposed to promote that feeling. Okay,
Yeah.
and so I've seen like some ridiculous movies, like all three Human Centipedes.
Mm,
even though the second one's like banned in the UK.
hmm
And there's a Eden Lake. I don't know if you've ever
hmm
watched that.
I haven't, but I know of it.
Grimm. And then like other things which I don't even want to remember. But the no matter what, I completely hear what you're saying, and those are probably lacking in substance. And my point is that no matter how no matter how deep their substance, and I'm sure that they are like fantastic movies, like I'm sure that they say so much in those moments, the response that they get from me is one that doesn't like incline me to watch another one. And it's
Sure.
not because I don't think that they're good, and it's not that I don't think that they demonstrate all of the deeper meanings and all of the deeper things that you just said, and all of the psychological kind of liberties that they want to extend out to other people. But it's more that what it promotes, what it the response that it gets from me is not, oh, I'm going to keep watching this
Okay.
because I've got quite a vivid imagination and I feel like, oh well, that's something that worries me and scares me, and that's
hmm
something that I can imagine and therefore see.
No, sure. And what I'm not trying to do here is convert you into being a massive horror fan on the spot.
Yeah,
But that does bring me on to the next topic, which is scariness in movies that aren't necessarily horror films.
for
There's
sure.
one that I always cite, which obviously I owe this to Mark Kermode because he's seen a million more films than I ever will.
Hmm.
But it's absolutely true, and I completely resonate with his point of view, which is there's a film called Spoorloos, which is its Dutch title. It's from 1970s, which translates as The Vanishing, right?
Spoilers.
And Spoorloos for
That's the sound that I make when I get in the bath. Spoilers.
Spoorloos. Um, it's for 95% of the film, it's
Hmm.
a classic kind of thriller. It's not horror in the slightest. It's just
Mm.
this interesting story.
Okay.
And then at the end, one character does something so unutterably disgusting and horrible that it completely changes the film. It's a 12 certificate, right? It's not gory, it's not massively scary and hyped up or anything, but the ending of it, because of the emotional resonance and this sort of unutterable betrayal of what's gone on and how
Mm.
you resonate with the story, is one of the scariest things that I have ever seen. And I think there's loads of examples of films which aren't necessarily designed to be scary, which end up leaving a really, really strong emotion in you because they have unsettled you or done something scary.
Mm.
And I think that's the best bit of horror that people tap into, is the bits that leave you sort of shaken and thinking and stirring. So is there a film that's not designed to be scary that you remember being absolutely sort of terrified at? Not necessarily because there was an image or something that was scary, but because of the way it made you feel.
Well, I think that there are lots of films that do that in moments. Like if I were to pick out a few, then I absolutely could. But it's also like it depends on what you find scary individually. So they might
Hmm
not have been intending to scare me, or they might not have been intending to make me feel like that particular emotion. But because I have, and I don't know, because I'm claustrophobic or whatever, I don't like the feeling of that. But I mean, the one that springs to mind is you took me to see Mission Impossible, the new one.
Did you see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning?
That one. And we saw that in the big BFI
We did.
IMAX.
We did.
Um, and I can swear on here, can't I?
Absolutely.
I did think that a lot of it was wank. I didn't like the first, I'm going to say solidly
Hour,
half hour, at
full
least,
hour. So it's
probably
an hour
hour.
of one of the
I thought that
worst
the
films you've
first
ever seen.
hour, I did hate that, I have to
Hmm
admit, because I thought
hmm
that people would speak for 3 minutes and then or they'd speak for 3 seconds
And we
and
actually
then it
didn't
would
need
hit
the exposition dump recapping the entirety of the
and
film that
the
came before it because
exposition
we had
dump was
3 hours of the
boring
film that came
and
before it.
like
Yeah.
it was just like close-ups of Tom's face and I don't really care. So yeah, all of those things.
Yeah.
But the bit that I was really gripped by was the underwatery submariney bit. I
Yes,
thought
of
that
course.
was an unbelievable example of like filmmaking. I was like,
You were
that's
making little sounds like, "Oh my
I
God."
was shitting bricks.
Yeah.
It was a very impressive thing to watch. Okay,
hmm
this whole idea that firstly claustrophobia plays a part of it. Secondly, the addition of water and deep water, which quite a lot of people have like a fear of. Third, the kind of risen tension of nuclear warheads that are just
hmm
kind of bombing around. And then he does the thing that you think is don't think it can get scarier, or like you don't think it can get like more anxiety inducing or more tense.
Mhm.
And then he takes off the one life-saving thing that he
I think I'll
has.
take my suit off. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah. I
I'll
think we'll
take
do
my
this with my
suit off
pants
so that I'm basically like
in my
on
underwear.
death's door. Yeah. And so that I thought was a really great example of like, oh, this isn't a horror movie, but I am experiencing the tension that one might get from a horror film.
Hmm. And
Um,
isn't it interesting that that is the moment? I mean, obviously the rest of the film is a bit boring, so I
yeah,
understand
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But is
yeah.
but that is the moment it scared you the most, and that's the bit that sticks out to you more than any other bit of that film.
But that's because I think they put more effort into that bit than
Well, it may
any other
well be.
part
That
of
may
the
well be
film.
part of it, of course, but I think your strongest emotional resonance, actually your strongest emotional connection with that
Mm.
film at that moment was the bit which petrified you the most.
No,
They
actually, I
could
think
have.
the strongest emotional resonance with that film was where I nearly threw up when he and Thingy were in the tent at the end.
Oh yeah.
That was
Well,
that
of
was
course
what
it's
genuinely
overbearing as
that's
well.
what prompted the biggest reaction from me because we were sat there and I was about to eat a cola bottle out of my pick and mix and I went "Ugh," like
Oh God.
grim. But
So
I see what you mean. But I think that they put right. I counter your argument. I understand you. I get what you're saying. But they put, I think, their main budget or their main efforts into two parts of that film. One of them was the submarine bit, and one of them was
Mhm.
the airplaney sky flying
Yeah, yeah,
Tom Cruise on the side of it climbing across. Okay, I
yeah.
think that's where they put all of their budget, and they also cast Hannah Waddingham, and then they were like, "Great, we're done." Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and so I think that like my takeaway from that film is the things that they put effort into.
Mhm.
And
Of
so
course.
while I think that yeah, sure, that got the most like emotional response from me, that's because I
Mm.
think it was a significant part of the movie. You literally said when we were in the cinema, you turned and said something like "filmy wanky" to me. You were like, "Oh, they changed the aspect ratio for this," or something like that. Like
Yeah, they
they
had, yeah.
they'd like
They'd made it wider.
yeah, they'd made it wider so that it encompassed the whole
Yeah.
BFI screen so that you could like that's what I mean. They clearly put the effort into getting that response from you in that moment. And the
Yeah.
rest of the film, the reason that's my take home is because that's what their effort was.
It's interesting. I understand that, but what I will say is that they could have done that still impressively without evoking that same sense of sort of unease and fear. Actually, they could have
Yeah.
made a really cool sequence where he navigates a submarine, and it doesn't feel like, despite how big the screen is, it doesn't feel like the walls are closing in. And or it's like, what I love
Mm,
about that sequence is it goes from massive expanse of endless pressurized ocean to tiny cabins in
yeah.
submarine, and it makes you feel the same way the whole way through.
Hmm,
Right? I think it was
hmm,
brilliant.
hmm,
Have you seen Parasite?
No.
Okay, one of the great movies of the 21st
What's it
century,
about?
right? So it's about
A
a
parasite.
nope, it's about a poor family
Oh,
who are very much struggling to make any ends meet at all
okay.
in Seoul, and they hatch a plan where one of the members of the family starts to, through circumstances and luck, work for a very, very rich family. And
Hmm.
over time, they start to get every single member of the family to work for this family, right? Now it's not a horror film; it's a social thriller, and all its commentary is on class, right?
Okay.
There is a moment in it, and I won't spoil anything for you. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean.
Mm.
Where a woman looks from her kitchen toward a child, sorry, looks from the kitchen towards the door down to their cellar, basically. What you see is one of the creepiest things I've ever seen in a film. Like genuinely, the image, just that sole image of what you see is absolutely horrific. It's
Moldy
completely out of
marmalade. I know.
Basically, yeah. It's
Yeah.
completely out of line with the entire rest of the film. That doesn't make any contextual sense. But because of the emotion that you then elicit from the people telling the story,
Mm.
it actually fits in completely perfectly, right? It's got one essentially like it's a thriller and it's kind of,
Are
surprises
you
you
going
at
to
some.
keep talking? Are you going to tell me what they see?
No, I don't want to tell you what they see. It's a spoiler. I don't
Oh.
want to tell you what they see. But my point is that nothing about it is a horror film. It's all a thriller, and there's moments of surprise and suspense and stuff, but it's
Hmm.
not it's not a horror film. But
Okay.
that moment is absolutely a horror moment, and what
Hmm.
it does is it reinforces so many of the themes and the underlying social messages of the piece, and it does it in the best way possible, which is to make you just for one moment go, "Oh my God, that is petrifying," and now I understand everything else. What I think is good about
Hmm.
films that aren't horror films but use those scary moments to elicit reactions is that it's actually a computing method. What it does is it gives you the emotional resonance that a character will have to understand what the rest of the film or what their experience is actually like.
But
And I
in a way,
think,
you're kind of backing up my previous point in that, like, the whole film, if the whole film was like that moment, if the whole
mhm.
film was that Stella moment, you'd be like,
No, but
that's
it could be.
promotion, that's promoting like an emotional response. But the reason that you enjoy it is because it's kind of not a horror film. It has a social commentary, and then there is a moment of
Yes,
horror.
but that's one example, and there are endless horror films with just constant social
Mm,
messaging, right? I'm just saying, I think as a tool, as an emotional tool, using horror, even if it's briefly, either for
mhm.
the whole film or as it briefly, I think is one of the best methods you can have. And also, you look
And
into the
that I'm
history
not
of horror.
disagreeing with.
Hmm.
Like that's what I'm saying. When I was watching Vigil, there were moments of what you would call like horror when there's like claustrophobia and you're not sure and blah 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 blah. But like, well, I don't know, it's horror, but certainly thriller. But like, but that's why I enjoyed watching it because there was the momentary relief as well
Hmm.
from that.
Yeah, sure, but there's horror films that are out and out, non-stop, hard-hitting sludge fests of horror, and then there's
Mm,
horror films that give you breathing space in between, where things happen and story progresses, right? So you saw Oppenheimer, right?
hmm.
Now, I would argue one of the bits that sticks out more than anything in that film is the horror sequence after they've just finished the bomb, and then he goes to give that speech to everyone at Los Alamos about, I just wish we had in time to use it against the Germans, and everyone stands up and claps, but you only hear people standing up, you don't hear them shouting. And then you see that girl's face and her skin start to peel off as if she's been hit by, the force of a nuclear bomb. And then he walks out and he stands in something and he looks down and he realizes it's the ashened body of someone who's been hit by an atomic bomb, right? And then
Oh, I'm
he
so
walks out
sorry.
and
I
someone's
actually
sick.
genuinely don't remember this bit, but I believe you.
Okay. Well, it's just after they've
Okay.
successfully tested the bomb, and
Okay.
he goes and gives this speech, and he's actually sweating. He's like, I don't know what I've done. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know what's going on.
Mm,
And it turns into a horror film for about 2 minutes. Oppenheimer turns into a horror film, and
hmm
it stands out so much
hmm
in all of Oppenheimer. I mean, a lot of Oppenheimer is people talking in rooms, which a lot of it is very interesting, but it's not everyone's cup of tea, so I understand. But that moment is so powerful and hard hitting, and you could do that in a whole film. They could have made the whole film like that, or they could have saved it for moments like that. But that's the strongest emotional response we get from any moment of that film. Now, the same can be said of so many things. Obviously, it can be used wrongly, and so many horror films use everything wrongly. And there's a trope, and it becomes tropey, and it
hmm
becomes stereotypical and predictable and horrible and rubbish and all that sort of stuff. But I I can't think of many more films that have elicited a stronger emotional resonance, not just in terms of fear, but in terms of recognition and understanding and movement than horror films have.
Okay, I hear you, but I just disagree. Like I think that there can be horror elements in something that aren't horror films that have elicited really strong reactions from me. But it like the film overall is what's got my attention.
Sure, and I'm saying it has to be a horror film for it to elicit an attention from me. But you've seen The Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yeah.
It's written by Stephen King, the great horror author of American fiction, right?
hmm
And
But it's
by
not a
all,
horror movie.
not necessarily, but by all accounts, it could be. This horrible environment with people constantly under threat, with things at every turn, jump scares present in it, unsettling imagery, unsettling themes, unsettling music,
Yeah,
really
for
emotional
sure, but
stuff.
it's not constructed like a horror. You could argue that anything could be a horror movie.
But I
Fucking
think
A
what you're
Knight's Tale with Vanessa
no, but
Hudgens could
but
be a horror movie. A
what you're
man comes
then
back in time, and oh my God, and he's dressed as a knight, and he doesn't know what the Kardashians are.
no, no,
Horror!
no. This is all reductive because what you're doing is assuming that there is a structure to a horror film. Of course, there isn't. Jean Dielman, 23, Quai de Commerce, 1080 Brussels, is a 3 hour film where a woman does domestic chores non-stop, and that's all you see, right? And by the end of it, you are having a panic attack.
Oh,
It is a horror film, except it's not nothing about it looks like a horror film, but it's a horror film.
I know what you're saying that not every horror film is like that, but
Hmm.
the lasting effect, something that classes the genre of horror is that you leave thinking that was a fundamentally scary and or anxiety inducing movie.
Hmm.
Okay? That's how you would define the genre. Yeah.
Hmm.
I like being able to leave something going, there were incredible moments in that, and there were scary moments, and there were, moving moments, and blah, 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 blah. But leaving it, my final decision on that thing isn't always just that it was scary or that it.
Yeah, but okay, and that's fine, but that's also a personal view.
Yeah, that's
And
what I'm saying though. Like I'm
no,
saying
no,
that
no, I get that. But I think also what you have to do, and what I think the best argument for um seeing why horror is such an integral part of cinema, and I think it needs to be taken more seriously,
sure.
is that you go back to the history of cinema, right? And the birth of the moving image was absolutely something which petrified people, right? And people kept coming back to it because
What, the
um
man on the moon?
no, 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 no. Way before Méliès,
Oh,
right? The
sorry.
first ever moving images, people genuinely believed that if you took the image of something or someone that already existed or whatever, and then you imparted motion on it, you stuck it in that spinning thing, where you look through the gaps and the image starts to move and all that sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff. If you did that, then someone's soul, that the soul of that image would be alive, and people go, well, where does it go when it stops? For the first time those moving images, people genuinely thought, like, especially in Japan, people thought, well, that's obviously alive, so where's it gone? And
Okay.
people kept coming back to it because they couldn't get this intangible, unsettling feeling out of their head. It's like why people used to love going to seances. And do you know what they still call film screenings in France to this day? Seance. Because that's where it started, that's where it came from, that's where people keep wanting to go back to you're going to a moment where while you're in the cinema, you are separated from the rest of the world and you're transported to a place where you're going to be evoked, one way or the other. And so much of the birth of cinema lies in horror. You look at the very, very early films like Nosferatu, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's not the oldest film in the world. It's only from the 1940s, but there's a film I love called Onibaba, which is a Japanese horror film where someone gets a horrific carnival mask stuck to their face and they can't take it off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's set in these sort of like really unsettling whistling cornfields in Japan and everything. It evokes the sense of feeling of place, of cold, of time frame as well, and all that gives people such a strong emotional response that actually I think all of cinema kind of goes back into that thing of people loving to tell ghost stories that emerge from people around a fire pit trying to give people, strong emotional reactions to stories. And often that came from things like the supernatural or things like stuff they couldn't control. And the big win for horror, I think, and why it gets people thinking so much is because there are big elements of it that is, as a story, you don't think you could control if you were in that. I know you said earlier, like, why you like A Quiet Place. And it's a great reason to like A
Mm,
Quiet Place is to go, what would I do if I couldn't
mm-hmm.
speak, or how would I play this? Or if like in Get Out, would I notice? How would I
Mm-hmm.
escape? Would I be able to be free of this? It's a
Mm-hmm.
great way of looking at it. But that comes from being able to feel in that moment understanding and then being able to feel immersed in that world. And the strongest form of immersion is always that which is going to give you the strongest emotional reaction. And the cinema is about immersing you and it's about giving you transcendental experience. And
Mm-hmm.
what does that best for me, in my view, and has done since the history of moving image, is something which seems otherworldly or unsettling. And horror taps into that better than pretty much anything else. Um, I mean, that's a wanky film answer for it, but
No, no, I understand where you're coming from. I think that there are reasons that I don't watch horror movies, and that's because I don't know which one it's going to be. I don't know if
of
it's going to
course,
be The Nun or I don't know if it's going to be Us. Like,
that's a
so
very fair point.
one of the reasons that I might not go and see something that's advertised as horror is because I'm like, well, it could be one of the two, and I don't want 50% of those. So
Absolutely.
let's steer away.
Hmm.
But you make a good point about the kind of immersion of oneself into an idea and all this kind of stuff. And that's why people really tap onto things and get involved and really feel like such an emotional response to something or such a personal connection because they feel it so strongly. But I would argue that I don't think I don't think horror does that necessarily better than other things for me. I think
Okay.
it's something that does it well if it's produced and created it well. But
Hmm.
if I was going to do something, sorry, if I was going to get invested in something, it would be something perhaps more emotional. It would
Hmm.
be perhaps something conceptual. There's a reason that like these things like Harry Potter, that Game of Thrones, that the Hunger Games, that Divergent, all that kind of stuff have these Twilight have these unbelievable like cult followings. And sure, I'm sure that the emotional response of the scary moments and the kind of life-threatening situations. I'm sure that that is part of that element, but they want to be immersed in that world, the good, the bad, the happy, the sad, the all of that kind of stuff. And that's what I mean in that variation sometimes is the most prominent thing for me to get an emotional response. And
Mhm.
so while horror is absolutely a part of that, it's not the key thing for me, and therefore it's not I'm not going to see something advertised with that as its key element.
And that's so fair. And I totally understand that. And the fact that you know that about what you want your watching habits to be is a good thing.
Mm.
I do at this point want to come on to one of my favorite films of the year, which is Sinners.
Yeah, I still
Which,
haven't seen it. I know I should.
okay, it's brilliant, and it is absolutely a horror film, but it spends so much emotional weight on character and circumstance
Right.
that by the time you get to the big horror bits, everything feels completely justified and completely earned. And films that do that, films that manage to sort of side you with people as well as something like Sinners does,
Mm.
and introduce you to the human elements of these characters above all else. And then when you put them in those life-threatening situations, you can't help but sympathize. You can't help but almost empathize because you too, watching the film, are scared just as they would be.
Mhm.
Um, Everything about Sinners is brilliant. The music absolutely has to win all the awards going. It's unbelievable. Ludwig Göransson's a
Oh,
genius.
can I jump on that?
Are you going to talk about horror music?
Yeah.
Because it's an absolutely fundamental part of horror films. I know we've spoken on this podcast before about music and how it plays into horror and stuff like It Follows or you look
Oh,
at
I've seen some of the its.
oh, so again, I mean, there is interesting stuff going on there, but I think it tends to fall more into the category of oh, it's a big scary clown for me.
Yeah, that's what yeah.
The
Sorry. I thought
music, no,
you were
it's
talking about
fine.
it, but I think you just said the word
I,
it.
I
And
was talking about It Follows, which is a completely different film.
uh
Um, well, something like It Follows, the best way to empathize with the characters is to see them being petrified and then be petrified yourself because what they're experiencing is petrifying. And in that moment, you lose your story more than I ever do in anything else. But yeah, horror music is a big, big thing, and Sinners demonstrates that perfectly. Because if you listen to the soundtrack all the time, which I have done, it
mhm,
doesn't necessarily sound like horror music. And there's loads of great songs on it. There's a song called "I Lied to You," which is about the kid of a preacher who's the main sort of character, and he goes to this joint that the two Michael B. Jordans have opened, and he's their musical act for the night, and he sings this thing. I was like, I'm sorry, Dad, but I love soul music. I love this. I love the blues, and I'm gonna
mhm,
sing it. And that's I lied to you. I'm gonna do it. I said I was gonna stop, but I'm gonna keep going. And what happens in that moment in the film is there's a celebration of the history of all kind of alternative blues music.
mhm.
And it manifests itself perfectly into the film. Now, if I hadn't have been scared for the 25 minutes prior, then that could have felt so out of the blue and unearned, right? But I was at such a base connection with Sinners in this terms of like, oh, this is unsettling me. Oh, that's creepy. Oh, I hate that. Jack O'Connell's absolutely terrifying that by the time it got to that point, knowing what may happen further down the line, given that it was a horror film, I was suddenly kind of I'm a middle class white guy from the north of England. I've got no connection to black blues music in the slightest. But
Mm.
in that moment, I was listening to all this music and I felt my soul literally connecting with it. I felt genuinely like that moment was like lifting me up, right? And that was there because I was essentially stripped raw
Mm.
to my very core emotions
Mhm.
of wanting safety, fear, adrenaline, but ultimately kind of there's a huge theme about love in Sinners.
Mhm.
It's absolutely enormous, but it's still a horror film.
I
Um,
didn't know that Sinners was a horror film. Like I don't feel like it was
mhm.
marketed as a horror film.
It absolutely wasn't. It was marketed more as a sort of interesting kind of like
Like kind
cool
of
thriller.
thrillery vibe.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Which
I mean,
is
it absolutely is a horror
but
film.
that's
It's
what I mean.
about
Like, so that's something
vampires.
that I would have wanted to go and see. And there must be that I'm sure that there is horror in there, and you've just explained some of the like horror
Well,
elements in.
it's about vampires, so yeah.
Okay. Okay, if we're gonna go there. Like, I wouldn't class Twilight as a horror movie,
No.
but there's vampires in it,
Mhm.
right? But like, so Sinners wasn't marketed as a horror movie. And that's why I would consider going and seeing it.
Mhm.
Because they're saying, look, you may feel this thing in this movie that we have created, but it's not the primary thing. It's not the reason that you're going. Whereas I
Mhm.
find that some horror movies, like lots of horror movies are marketed to be like, oh, do you want to be scared? Come along. Like, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
no, cool, I don't. But the reason that I think horror can be scary, I don't think horror is scary without the music or the sound. And so
Agree.
like
I completely
that's
agree.
and I'm a very like auditory person. So like
Yeah.
if I hear something sad, I'm being like, oh, that's sad. If I hear something
Hmm.
scary, I'm like, that's good. And that's the same as like most humans. But that's to me the key element of the reason that horror is quite often not necessarily just what you see, but like the jump scare of like what you hear or the sound or the tension or the
Yes, and that is absolutely a big part of it. But what I would, and I agree with you, and what I would say to sort of add on is that the reason for that is that I think horror, when done well, has to be applauded more than anything else because it is practically the most difficult form of filmmaking to do. I think
more
creating a
than anything else.
I genuinely believe so because now, obviously, with sci-fi, as long as you've got a budget enough for as many computers as possible, you can do anything, right? With a horror film, it's actually about the construction of the scenery and the construction of the story and the scene itself, which enables a strong emotional response. The reason why people don't look at horror as like serious films a lot of the time is because it's the easiest to trope. So people go, it's a horror film. There must be a big swell in the music, and then it'll be
Mm.
silent, and then there'll be a big crash, and that'll work. Or you pan to the left, and there's nothing there. You pan back to the right. You pan back to the left, and then there's something there again. All these things, which are filmic techniques, which at one point were completely innovative, have now been troped to high heaven. So that now making a really good horror film is incredibly, incredibly difficult because you have to get creative. It forces you. The reason why every student's first film that they make is a horror film is because it forces you to be as creative as possible. You have to work out how to set up a camera to make that shot look good so that someone can appear and it all look, cool. Or you have to work out how to use a skateboard as a dolly so that you can pretend to have someone chase down a corridor because you want it to look atmospheric and stuff. It's the bare essentials of filmmaking.
I
Because you're
don't
trying to
disagree.
evoke emotional response as strong as possible. So
I
that's
don't
what happens.
disagree with you, but I think that that argument could be made about lots of different genres. Like I think there's lots of different genres that now we have like tropes about, and that actually, if you want to be innovative or interesting or like get the emotional response that you want, you have to do something a bit different, or you have to like present something
Of course you
new.
do, but by the same token, can you think of a genre of film outside of maybe musicals that is as shat on as horror is? Some of the great films of the last 25, 30, 40, 45 years have been completely ignored by major players because they had a horror element to them. So stuff like Get Out, it won best original screenplay at the Oscars, and everyone went
Hmm.
great. And it was a bill to be this kind of like, oh my God, this could be amazing, this could be what an evening, and then it just won nothing. They gave it the sort of the piecemeal award and then went, no, we'll just leave it at that. It doesn't deserve anything else. When actually, it's one of undoubtedly the films of that year. Strong performances, strong messaging, storytelling, camera work's amazing. The music's brilliant. Same with Parasite. Jung Jae-il's score didn't get nominated at all.
Hmm.
And that makes no sense because a huge part of why Parasite gets you emotionally is the score of it. Like all these things, I think so many horror films just get completely like Us. It was nowhere to be seen for any nominations for anything, and it's one of the most like metaphorically rich films you've ever seen.
Okay.
And I think it comes with a label which you have to fight against. You have to really be exceptional now to be like The Exorcist didn't win Best Picture, didn't even come close. So and now it's regarded as one of the greatest films ever made. And so
Okay.
it's like I think part of the problem with horror is that because there's so much shit, you then end up fighting against that perception and that trope. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because it's been done to high heaven. Whereas largely, if you're doing a love story, the camera work is actually easier. Yeah, you need to be able to show emotion, and that's something that no filmmaking is easy, and
Hmm.
there's difficult bits to all of it. But actually, stripping somebody down to a state of fear based on the images you're able to construct relies a lot less on kind of basic work and actually relies a lot more on creativity and analytical approach to filmmaking, which a lot of other genres don't actually encompass.
Sure. I think look, I can't speak to like the awards of them. Like
Sure.
I obviously, I'm not as well versed as you in like, what's won what and when and why and all this kind of stuff. And any of the other basic questions you want to ask, who, where,
Mhm.
how. What I can say is like the only thing I can attest to is like the emotional response that I have to a movie.
Mhm.
And the thing that you say about like, I don't think that anything prompts as strong a response as horror. I would disagree with that because I think that fear is a more all-encompassing emotion than something like happiness. You don't tend to like if you're just feeling happy in the day, you're not like this is running through every inch of me. Whereas if you're feeling even a bit scared, you're like, okay, I feel this
Hmm.
really acutely. So I
Hmm.
think that fear, when it's evoked, is an easier thing to feel, if that makes sense. Like it's a stronger emotion. But
I
if
don't
I
know if it's
watch,
easier to feel, but I think it's a more impactful feeling.
sure, yeah, yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Um, but as in you need less of it in order to promote a stronger response.
I understand, yes.
But if I think about one of the most impactful movies that I've watched that promoted, like that got one of the strongest emotional responses out of me, I think
Hmm.
about something like Bombshell,
Okay.
the Margot Robbie, Nicole Kidman,
Yeah,
Charlize
yeah, yeah.
Theron, the Fox News scandal
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
about Roger Ailes, and that is an incredible piece of work because that's something that I would like. That's something that I feel very like emotionally. Um, oh, I feel very sympathetic and very like empathetic towards that thing. It's about women being treated appallingly within the workplace and the acting, and I found that the script and things like that. The response that it got from me was stronger, I find, and more complex than some of the responses that horror has got from me.
I
And
understand that completely.
that's not because horror isn't an impressive thing. It's not because it shouldn't have won any awards. It's not because it's not great in a lot of ways, but it's
Mm.
because I find that fear outweighs a lot of other things, and therefore it's a stronger emotion to feel for less. Whereas
I,
when somebody can get that response that Bombshell got from me, that's a
mhm.
much more varied and much more complex thing.
Yeah, I understand that. I would also say that a lot of the stuff about Bombshell, which is kind of the most impactful, is the stuff which makes you the most unsettled, which I also think is a big part of what horror taps into, because
Mm,
those scenes, yeah, they really are horrible and unsettling. And by the end of it, the emotional stuff is heightened because you were taken to that unsettling place beforehand. So that by the time you get to the end of the story and all that sort of the end of the arcs for every
mm.
character, you empathize with it so much more because you've been to the horrible place with them, and then you see their progression from there. So, but I understand. I completely hear what you're saying, and also
Mm.
that's it's just a case of everyone has a personal preference about what they do and don't find
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
stimulating.
for sure.
So, my laptop is about to die,
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm about to socialize with people. So,
Oh my
what
God,
I
no
want to
way.
do, I know, right?
Congratulations.
I've
That
got
must be the
like
first time in
actual
what, 3 years?
actual friends. What I want to close on
Yeah.
is, so you mentioned Us, but what do you think is genuinely the scariest film you've ever seen? If you're going to nail it down to one, what's been the
The
most scary
scariest
film
thing I've ever
you've ever seen?
seen. Oh, I don't know. Your face in the morning? Um,
That's right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this fucking bitch.
I don't know what the scariest film that I've ever seen is. Actually, I do know what the scariest film is that I've ever seen.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's a good one.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that the scariest film I've ever seen is The Human Centipede 2.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair shout.
And I
It's
think it's
absolutely horrible.
the worst thing I've ever seen in
Hmm.
my life.
Yeah, okay, that's fair because it is. It's also it's shit and terrifying.
It's
What I will
shit and
say,
terrifying and also just scarring in every way.
yeah, 100%. You never recover.
Yeah.
My contribution to that, if you want a film this Halloween to make a potential new partner cuddle up to you on the sofa and put your arm around them and goes, all right, I'll keep you safe. Just for
Oh,
scares. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is absolutely the scariest film that I have ever seen.
okay.
Um, and actually, it's not a bad film either. It's very well made. It's low budget, but it's really well practically shot and put together and all that sort of stuff. But it is petrifying.
Did I
Um,
tell you that the first time I watched The Woman in Black, I was watching it with somebody, and every time that he jumped, in inverted commas, he would
mhm.
jump closer to me on the sofa. So that by the time we got to like close to the end of the movie, I was like, "You're like so much closer than when we began."
I just needed something. Okay, leave me alone. All right. Well, Verity, thank you very much for doing this at short notice. I will say as
That's
well.
all right.
Um,
My work was
that's
cancelled.
yeah, it's been a very interesting discussion, and yeah, I think we've talked about a lot, and I'm glad that there's some films that you have seen that are genuinely proper horror films, and that haven't just not seen any because you don't like them. I appreciate you actually committing to the bit and watching some horror films.
Oh yeah, I've watched some stuff. I wouldn't
Yeah.
watch it again
Okay.
though.
Well, watch Sinners because although it's a
I
horror
will
film,
watch
there's so
Sinners.
much of it is utterly brilliant and will move you. So
Yeah,
yeah, watch that.
lovely.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I know the podcast has been away for a long time, but it should be back up and running a bit more now. So let's hope for a more consistent upload schedule from me.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will both see you again very soon. Thank
Happy
you.
Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye.